All right, good morning, everyone. People are still sprinkling in, but I'm going to go ahead and begin. They are definitely sprinkling in. I'm going to go ahead and begin. I will say that I'm going to have a full screen open. I am not going to be monitoring a chat. So if you guys please let me know if you guys have any questions. I believe you guys have a way of like raising your hand on here. Please raise your hand here on the Zoom. Let me know you guys have a question so that I can go ahead and stop. There are not many changes on this contract. Most of it, the vocabulary became a little bit easier to read. I think it's my take on it. But it will go in effect November 1st, which is next Monday. So as of right now, if you have any ongoing offers that you will be sending out, you will be using the same exact contract that you guys have been using. And once November 1st hits on .loop, we should be seeing, we should see the change into this new contract that will go into effect next Monday. Okay. Any questions before we log in, before we begin? Beautiful. Yes, Isaac.
No. I'm sorry. I'm just touched by mistake. Thank you.
Okay. All right. By being a member of the board, you should have a membership to NAR. Okay. By being a member of NAR, you're able to go into your floridarealtors.org, website, and you guys are able to check out the changes of the updated contracts. As you can see, they've updated the HASIS, they updated the residential contract, they've added 3 new riders into our contracts, and they've updated as well a few of the riders. I believe it was 6 of them that they updated. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They've updated 7. In order to view the contracts, the riders, and I want you guys to notice that there is a new mold inspection rider for the residential contract, not HASIS. I was told that it was very important to let you guys know that it was not for the HASIS. But I do want you guys to know that these new riders do exist, okay? To see the changes, the one that I clicked on was the red line, and that is the one that we're going to be following today. I also have open, which might be easier for you guys to view, is the summary of changes. I have it open as well. It's just a summary of the changes, but you don't actually see the contract and what has changed in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and work with the actual HASIS contract today, okay? Again, I am not monitoring the chat, so if you guys do have any questions, please raise your hand here via Zoom, and I will try to answer as much as I possibly can, okay? As you guys can see right away, they have changes in regards to personal property, and I think that these changes have been added due to, it is 2021, so there's, I don't think intercom is being used as much anymore, but they did add thermostats, doorbells, television wall mounts, television mounting hardware, mailbox keys, storm protection items, panels, and they took out the word panels. They just put items and hardware. I do want to remind you that if you are entering into an offer and these items are part of the property, keep them as is. If something is no longer there, please strike it out, okay? If you're representing a seller, make sure that all the items that are mentioned here are actually a part of that out of that transaction, okay? They took out a lot of you're going to see that the very next change, initial deposit to be held in escrow in the amount of, and then checks subject to collection. They just kind of changed, from all in caps to lowercase. That's not a major change into the contract. From there, escrow agent name, emails, phone numbers, and additional email. No major changes there. So now it's escrow agent. They took out information. It's just escrow agent name. They added an additional email here. They stroke it out of the other side. So that's, the next very change is that it went from all in caps to just lowercase. Again, not a major change there. Closing and closing date. I think that part of the changes is mostly vocabulary. So let's go ahead and read it. It says closing date. It says the closing of this transaction shall occur when all funds required for closing are received by closing agent and collected pursuant to Standard S, and closing documents required to be furnished by each party pursuant to this contract are delivered unless modified by other provisions of this contract. The closing shall occur on, and then the date. I think that the biggest thing here is the wording that they added is that, the actual closing of the transaction is when all funds required have been received by the closing agent and collected to pursuant, okay? So the wording in there is in there. So pretty much this is closed upon funding, okay? Extension of closing date. In the event closing funds from buyers, lenders are not available on closing date due to Consumer Financial Protection Bureau closing disclosure delivery requirements, if paragraph 8B is checked, loan approval has been obtained and lender's underwriting is complete, then closing date shall be extended for such period necessary to satisfy CFPB requirements, provided such period shall not exceed 7 days. This is not that your loan approval period has now an extension. This is only in the event that the closing funds from buyer's lender are not available on closing due date due to the CFPB, okay? The only change that happened here is instead of 10 days, it is now 7 days, okay? Any questions there?
Yes, Andreina.
Yes.
So this happens, let's see, if we close on a Friday, 3 p.m. and the lender needs at least 2 hours to fund the transaction, it will roll over automatically to the next Monday, I guess?
Yeah, not to exceed 7 days.
Okay. So you don't
And
have
this
to
is
do
only in regards to funds, okay? So if your clients have all, if they have all signed that closing package, the closing disclosures and everything's done, and all that is missing is just the monies from the lender, then it extends no more than 7 days. Does this make sense?
Yeah, but we don't have to do anything
No.
at that moment, right? Okay.
No, nothing to be done at that point, okay? The very next change, they just took off the box in, okay? No major change there. Then it says deemed to, that was taken off for this occupancy and possession. And then it says, if occupancy is to be delivered before closing, buyer assumes all risk of loss to the property from date of occupancy, shall be responsible and liable for maintenance from the date, and shall have accepted the property in its existing condition as of time of taking occupancy. See Rider T, pre-closing occupancy by buyer. That is the only thing that has been added on here. B, check if property is subject to lease or occupancy after closing. This has been the thing that was added here, which I think it's really cool due to the state of our market, is that it states if property is subject to a lease or any other occupancy agreements, including seasonal and short-term vacation rentals. So I don't know, I had seen a lot of times where this was not checked off if it was a short-term or seasonal rental. So now you do have to check it off, even if it is a seasonal or short-term. Another part that I really like that they've added into this section is, if buyer determines and buyer, okay, so you know how you have to check that contract, you have 5 days from effective date for buyer to go ahead and check that lease. And then it states, if buyer determines in buyer's sole discretion that the lease or terms of occupancy are not accepted to buyer, buyer may terminate this contract by delivery of written notice, so forth and so forth. But what I like that they've added is stopple letters and seller's affidavit shall be pursuant to standard D. And over here it states, except that tenant stopple letters shall not be required on seasonal or short-term vacation rentals. Okay, so only if it is yearly lease, it is when it is required for stopple letters. Okay, you still have to provide that lease, but no stopple letters is required if it is a short-term or vacation vacation rental. Okay. Assignability, you know, the three have not changed. However, they did add that if no box is checked, then buyer may not assign this contract. Okay. Any questions there? Perfect. Here's where most of the changes, again, I do believe it's more vocabulary to make it easier on the read, more so than a major change. On financing terms, if financing is all it says is, this is a cash transaction with no financial contingency, period. Okay. And I like that they made this change because a lot of you guys love to turn in offers with hard money loans, and you guys check off cash. Okay, hard money loans is not cash. There's still a financial, obligation there. So, on term A, this is very easy. This is a cash transaction with no financial contingency, period. Okay. On option B, which is with financing, it says this contract is contingent upon, how many days. Okay, if left blank, then 30 days after effective date, and that will be your loan approval period. Okay, they added it at the very beginning instead of, within the paragraph. Then it says buyer obtaining approval of a conventional FHA, VA, other, and then it states or other mortgage loan for purchase of the property for a fixed, adjustable, fixed, or adjustable rate. Okay, I want you guys to notice that all they did here was just kind of change the wording around, and then we're going to go to the next section for a term of how many years. And two, buyer's mortgage broker or lender, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, a term of buyer's mortgage broker or lender having received an appraisal or alternative valuation for property satisfactory to lender. If either is required by lender, which is sufficient to meet the terms required for lender to provide financing for buyer and proceed to closing. Okay, this speaks about your appraisal contingency. Then on I, it says buyer shall make application for financing within how many days? That's still normal. After effective date, and use good faith and diligent effort to obtain approval of loan meeting the financing and appraisal terms of paragraph 8B1 and 2. And then it says loan, for loan approval. Within the loan approval period and thereafter to close this contract, loan approval, which requires buyer to sell other real estate property, shall not be considered loan approval unless rider V is attached. Did that make sense? Do you guys have any questions in regards to that? Good. Buyer's failure to use good faith and diligent effort to obtain loan approval during the loan approval period shall be considered a default on the terms of this contract. For purposes of this provision, diligent effort includes, but is not limited to, timely furnishing and all documents and information. required by buyer's mortgage broker and lender and paying for appraisal and other fees and charges in connection with buyer's application for financing. Buyer shall, upon written request, keep seller and broker fully informed about the status of buyer's mortgage loan application. This is a big one because I don't know if you guys remember, this used to say buyer shall keep seller and broker fully informed. So the biggest change here is that the buyer no longer has to keep anyone informed unless the seller's side is requesting it in a written form. Any questions with that? Good. Now, I'm going to read it again. Buyer shall, upon written request, keep seller and broker fully informed about the status of buyer's mortgage loan application, loan processing, appraisal, and loan approval, including any property-related conditions of loan approval. Buyer authorizes buyer's mortgage broker, lender, and closing agent to disclose such status and progress and release preliminary and finally executing closing disclosures and settlements as appropriate and allowed to seller and broker. I want you guys to notice, okay, not only do they have to ask for it by written request, the buyer has to authorize the mortgage, the lender, the closing agent, okay, in order for them to all give the status to the other side, okay? Any questions with that? All right, let's keep going. Now they have taken off the line, this line upon obtaining loan approval. What they did add was, if within the loan approval period, buyer obtains loan approval, buyer shall notify seller of same in writing prior to expiration of loan approval period. Or if buyer is unable to obtain loan approval within loan approval period, but buyer is satisfied with buyer's ability to obtain loan approval and proceed to closing, buyer shall deliver written notice to seller confirming same prior to the expiration of loan approval period. Does anybody have any question with this? This one's actually a very important one, okay? Because it says, you know, in simple wording, that the buyer does have to provide, okay, written loan approval to the other side, has to provide it to the seller, okay? However, if your loan approval does come with contingencies and the buyer feels that they're going to be able to satisfy those contingencies, you should still deliver this in writing to the seller confirming, you know, here we have our loan approval. It does have contingencies, but we do feel that we're going to meet these contingencies. So let's continue with our transaction, okay? The next one is, if buyer is unable to obtain loan approval within the loan approval period or cannot timely meet the terms of loan approval after the exercise of good faith and diligent effort, okay, buyer may terminate this contract by delivering written notice of termination to seller prior to expiration of the loan approval period, okay? Whereupon buyer is not in default under the terms of this contract, and buyer shall be refunded the deposit, thereby releasing buyer and seller from all further obligations under this contract. Any questions so far?
So, Andreina, in this last line, the title company, they don't have to sign the release and cancellation form because it says the buyer shall be refunded the deposit.
You still have to sign a release and cancellation. in order for any title company to disperse, right? What this is saying is, you know, if they are unable to meet, it's pretty much the exact same thing that I said before. The only difference is that you have to do it in written form. Where is it? If buyer is unable to obtain loan approval within loan approval period or cannot timely meet terms of loan approval after exercising good faith and diligent efforts, right? Buyer may terminate this contract by delivering written notice of termination. That's your release and cancellation right there. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, yes, okay.
Okay, so that is your release and cancellation. And you have to turn it into the seller prior to expiration of your loan approval period, okay? So it is the exact same thing that it pretty much said before. The difference here is just the wording used. You know, if we were to read how it said it previously to how, you know, everything that they scratched out to how it says it now, it's pretty much more or less the same. It's just the vocabulary has just become easier for us to read, okay? But it's still, you know, you still have to give that written notice. That would be your release and cancellation. And it does have to be, just like before, prior to the expiration of the loan approval period. Okay. Now, if we continue, it does say, if buyer fails to timely deliver any written notice, okay, provided for in paragraph 8 above to seller prior to expiration of loan approval period, then buyer shall proceed forward with this contract as though the above had been checked as of the effective date provided. However, seller may elect to terminate this contract by delivering written notice of termination to buyer within 3 days after expiration of the loan approval period. This is where your biggest change comes in, right? Before, so like before, it was just, we pretty much just all knew that if we don't have a loan approval by the expiration date, we've always known that the seller can back away. But now that seller has to do they have to deliver written notice to buyer within 3 days after expiration of that loan approval period. Okay. Now, if we continue, buyer, loan approval period. Provided buyer is not in default under the terms of this contract, buyer shall be refunded the deposit, thereby releasing buyer and seller from all further obligations under this contract. Okay, so if you guys come to that loan approval period and the seller, requests for, hey, have you guys received the loan approval? And you guys don't provide it by loan approval date, and the seller can back out, and that buyer is not a default in anything, but it's pretty much like, I've given you a letter, I don't have a loan approval yet, and you guys don't extend, then that is not not a default. Buyer is a default if you guys do not notify within the loan commitment period, just like before. Okay, the only thing that pretty much changes is just the vocabulary of how it's written. Any questions here?
Andreina.
Okay. Yes.
I didn't see the loan commitment period where you write the days.
That is not part of the changes that were done, but that it's right here. It literally in what changed was that it's in the very first line. This contract is contingent upon within days after effective date, and that becomes your loan approval period.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. But that is up there. That did not change. They still keep it at that 30 days if left blank. Now moving on. If buyer has provided either written notice provided for in paragraph 8 above, and buyer thereafter fails to close this contract, The deposit shall be paid to seller unless failure to close is due to 1, seller's default or inability to satisfy other contingencies of this contract. Okay, that's seller's default. 2, property-related conditions of the loan approval. This means, I don't, you know how you guys have FHA, and sometimes the FHA says, hey, you have to fix this part of the roof in order to close. That is a property-related condition, okay? Or you have to fix the water heater or that AC. Those are property-related conditions of the loan approval. These are items that the loan approval is asking you in regards to the property that have to be fixed. Okay, if the property-related conditions of the loan approval, specifically excluding the appraisal evaluation, meaning this has nothing to do with appraisal, have not been met, unless such conditions are waived by other provisions of this contract, okay, in which events the buyer shall be refunded the deposit, thereby releasing buyer and seller from all further obligation of this contract. Any questions there? Perfect. Assumption of existing mortgage, all they did was, you know, go from, they just added this uppercase in writer. Same thing here, for purchase of money, they put writer, and then they took out addenda, special clauses, you know, no major change there.
It also looks like they added did the writer change? Because it also says writer D and writer C instead of just writer. You see
Yes,
how
it's
first one is
probably
writer D,
one of the
the second
ones
one's
that
writer.
were, you have to look.
Oh.
You writer, you have writer CR6, these are, they added CR6 writer DD and CR6 writer, but we're not gonna go over the writers today.
No, I was just clarifying that.
But I do want you guys to know that 3 new writers were added into our
Oh,
forms,
wow.
and 7 have been changed, okay?
Oh my God.
I'm gonna give you this link in the chat. Now, the only way to access it is by being able to log into your Florida Realtors. Oops, I clicked on something. By being able to log into your Florida Realtors account, okay? All right, the very next thing that they did add under closing costs, okay? This is for costs paid by a seller. They added in here charges for FIRPTA withholding and reporting. And I love that they added that in there. Okay, any questions in regards to this? Beautiful. Over here in title insurance, they pretty much just changed the wording. The real property seller shall be furnished a copy to buyer and closing agent within 5 days. That's for your title. Another not major change, but another change in option 3, Miami-Dade Broward regional provision. It says buyer shall designate closing agent. Okay. That was added into your Miami-Dade Broward for title. I did ask the question if buyer designates closing agent, if the seller can still have their own representation, and I was told yes. The only difference here is that the closing agent is the one doing that, you know, title insurance. But they did add the wording that the buyer shall designate the closing agent, okay, which is the person who does that title insurance. So no changes there. They just added the wording in. Survey, okay, they added.
Question,
yeah.
What's the difference in between option 2 and option 3? The policy?
In option 2, the buyer shall designate and pay
Okay.
the owner's
The owner's
policy. Over here, we're just designating who the closing agent is, okay? But it's still the same way as before. The buyer pays for their part and the seller pays for their part. Okay, in option 2, the buyer not only designates, but they also pay for that owner's policy. Okay, So they still have they can still pick whoever is going to represent them, but the buyer, like, you know, as they've always done, they designate who's going to do that, who's going to be the closing agent, which is the one who gets that title insurance. Does that make
All right.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Survey, this is, they added in at least 5 days prior to closing date. Buyer may, at buyer's expense, have a real property surveyed as certified by a registered Florida surveyor. That is done with your title. All they did was add it here in the front on the very beginning. It was already there as part of that contingency on survey. Another change that was created was in the first option. This is for the special assessments. Remember that this is for public body, not for your associations or condos. Option B, what changed was mainly the wording of it. It says seller shall pay in full prior to or at time of closing any assessments allowed by the public body to be prepaid. For any assessments which the public body does not allow prepayment, option A shall be deemed selected for such assessments. This pretty much says, listen, the seller will pay for it in full if there's an option to have it paid in full. However, if those prepayments are in a payment period and it cannot be prepaid, then you have to pick option A, where the seller shall pay the installments due upon prior to closing. This is a lot because these public bodies assessments are usually placed in the taxes and not necessarily just in a bill form month to month. And I think that's why they created this change, okay? So if the seller is able to pay for it prior to, you know, time of closing, they shall do it. But if they cannot, then you have to pick option A. Does this make sense? Any questions there? Awesome. Over here, again, they changed the wording. If neither box is checked, then option A shall be deemed selected, okay? This paragraph shall not apply to special benefit tax lien imposed by a community development district, which is the CDD, pursuant to chapter 190F, as, you know, Florida statute, special assessments imposed by a special district pursuant to chapter, which lien or assessment shall be prorated pursuant to standard K. Again, what this is pretty much saying, which said it before in the current contract we're working on, this is not a CDD, okay? This has nothing to do with CDDs. This is just public bodies, okay? Does this make sense? Any question?
Tengo
Yes.
una pregunta, es que estaba buscando cómo levantar la mano, pero I couldn't see how to raise the hand.
It's okay.
It's Maria. Okay, it's Maria. Okay, I have just clarification as of the assessments that says that you were explaining before as section A and B, that says
Yes.
that if you think, because no one have a clue or an idea when we are dealing with this at closing, but let's say that if we put to cover our client, if we are representing the seller, we will put the A, we will select A. Then do you think is, but if we are representing the buyer, of course, we would like to select that one. But we can put in an addendum that if it's not possible to meet this at closing.
Well, you won't have to write it in an addendum because it is part of the contract. Okay.
No, but if it's not possible and still buyer wants that to be paid, if that is figured out after closing, is that a way or it has to be A or B?
Everything's pretty much negotiable, right? I would honestly tell you the reason why most likely they won't be able to pay that assessment in full is if they're putting it in taxes. And when it's placed in taxes, it is not something that it's $100, you know? It's probably something that's more than $2,000 that they're collecting. So even if you're representing the buyer, you can negotiate a certain amount. But this is something, this is public body stuff, right? So let's say you live in a house or in a condominium and they have to repair the streets right across from it or the lights in that neighborhood, and they're going to give you this special tax or this special assessment so that the residents of that community pay for it. Maybe there is no prepayment because there's not a full budget of how much that may be.
Okay. Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like maybe
Yeah.
this year's $1,000 and then next year the cost of materials went up and it's gonna be 3,000. So you might not know how much you'd actually be negotiating for.
Yes, I was thinking, for example, about water bills because it happened to me before that the seller wasn't able to pay the full amount of the water bill on the house, and then that my client wasn't able to open her account until the seller.
But this has absolutely nothing to do
Nothing
with
to do.
special assessment.
Okay, so it's not this one.
That's with title.
Okay, okay, okay.
That's
perfect.
with your title searches. This has absolutely nothing to do with special assessments.
Okay, so this is just a special assessment for public or city work.
Public body. This is with the county or city directly.
Okay, okay, got it. Okay, perfect.
Okay, and they'll get letters saying, hey, we're gonna be fixing the streets and a special assessment will be placed, and they're gonna have the chance to go to court and say if they want it or not, but this has absolutely nothing to do if, you know, that the seller would have a control of like a water bill. That
Oh,
is more title violations and liens.
okay, got it. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
You're welcome. All right, any other questions in regards to that? Awesome. All right, the very next one, permits disclosure. They just added wording, just pretty much adding in vocabulary. It says property which were made without required permits or made pursuant to permits which have not been properly closed or otherwise disposed of pursuant to section 553. So all they pretty much did was add that Florida statute in there. So no major change has been created there. On the flood zone and elevation, they stroke through the last part, which says the National Flood Insurance Program may assess additional fees or adjust premiums for pre-flood insurance. All that has been struck out. So no major change has been done for flood zone evaluation and certification. Your next changes, property maintenance. Pretty much it says, see paragraph 9A for escrow procedures if applicable. This for property maintenance, no major changes. They just added it, this one line. For inspection period, nothing has changed. Seller assistance and cooperation to close out building permits. All they did was, you know, take out that uppercase in permit, same thing here. So no changes have been created. Escrow agent and broker. It went from being capitalized to lower cases, same thing there, so no changes in that section. Same thing, they went from, is the same exact standards for real estate transactions, standards continued, so no change there. All right, time. I think this is my biggest one that I say it's my biggest change in this contract is here with time, okay? It states time is of the essence in this contract. Calendar days based on where the property is located shall be used in computing time periods. Does this make sense? Because I literally had to ask an attorney what this meant. Time is of essence and calendar days based on where the property is located shall be used in computing time periods. Basically, this means if the property is in Miami-Dade, Florida, okay, but the parties, buyers and sellers, one's in California and the other one is in China, okay, when it is time for delivery of this contract, okay, when the expiration dates are going to be, it is not going to be midnight where the parties are located. It is midnight where that property is located. Does this make sense?
Absolutely.
All right. So if your client says, I did not receive it because here in California is 5 o'clock, you know, and Miami is 8 o'clock, we are still going by that Miami time. We don't care where the party is located. Okay. Any questions in regards to this? Perfect. Other than time for acceptance and effective date has set forth in paragraph 3, any time periods provided for or date specified in this contract, whether pre-printed, handwritten, typewritten, or inserted herein, which shall end or occur on Saturday, Sunday, national legal public holiday, or a day on which a national legal public holiday is observed because it fell on a Saturday or Sunday, shall extend to the next calendar day, which is not a Saturday or Sunday, or a day which a national legal public holiday is observed. Okay, I will tell you this. One of the major things here that were taken off was that 5 o'clock. So this means we are no longer attaching it to, okay, so it fell on a Saturday, so now you have to turn it in or you have to do something by 5 o'clock on Monday. Now it is end of that, you know, calendar day, which means midnight. Any questions in regards to this? Because I think that this is the biggest change for all of us. Perfect. And I think that this is the biggest change for all of us because it talks about time. So time is still, you know, one, it's where the property is located, not when they receive it, okay? Not, you know, oh, you know, I didn't know I had to turn it in. My client did not sign it because they're in China and they are on a different, no, they have to sign it by Miami time. And they no longer have until 5 o'clock. If it's expired, if it's expiring, they have until midnight. Okay, that is a major change in this contract. The very next thing is also something that I found to be a major change. Obviously, the epidemics and all that stuff was added in. Let's go ahead and read it. I think this was also a major change in our contract. It says buyer or seller shall not be required to exercise or perform any right or obligation under this contract or be liable to each other for damages so long as performance or non-performance of the right or obligation of the availability of services, insurance, or required approvals essentials to closing is disrupted, delayed, caused, or prevented by a force majeure event, okay, which now means hurricanes, floods, extreme weather, earthquakes, fires, or other acts of God, unusual transportation delays, wars, insurrections, civil unrest, or acts of terrorism, governmental actions and mandates, government shutdowns, epidemics, or pandemics, which by exercise of reasonable, diligent efforts, the non-performing party is unable in whole or in part to prevent or overcome. Did you guys understand that so far? Beautiful. Now it says, the force majeure event will be deemed to have begun on the first day of effect, okay, of the force majeure, prevents performance, non-performance, or the availability of services, insurance, or required approvals, essentials to closing, all time periods affected by the event, including closing date, will be extended a reasonable time up to 7 days after the event is no longer prevents performance under this contract. Okay, meaning this contract, including closing date, will be extended up to 7 days after the event no longer prevents the performance of this contract. However, if such event continues to prevent performance under this contract more than 30 days beyond closing date, then either party may terminate. Meaning, you guys just saw how we went through a pandemic and we were shut down for 3 months. Okay, for 3 months, no insurance companies were out, no appraisers were going, no inspections could be done. Okay, so this pretty much says we can extend it for up to 7 days after the event no longer prevents us. However, if it is more than 30 days that is preventing us, then either party can terminate this contract. Any questions on this? All right, perfect. Those are, I will say, these are our two major changes on this contract, okay? Major change number one is, the time of our contract and everything that they added on here. I mean, some of it was still on there, the 7 days and the 30 were still there. Obviously, our major changes are in the blue. Those were our add-ons, but they did add, your governmental actions like mandates, government shutdowns, and pandemics. Those are really big because we just experienced that. And we experienced, a shutdown that was about 3 months. So this, gives everyone the option either to extend or to go ahead and terminate during this period, okay, for those reasons. Everything else is pretty much wording, no major changes from here on. Reporting obligation, these are your GTOs, closing agent with essential information and documentation related to buyer and its beneficial owners, including photo ID. This is pretty much if the money's, get stopped through the transaction due to that, Treasury Department's financial crime enforcement. So all they really did was add the including photo identification related to, but no major change there. That has always been done by our title companies for that closing agent. No major change here in procedures. They went from all caps to lowercase. And that procedures closing agents are subject to collection of all closing funds. That was just in caps. That's the change that's there. In prorations and credits, they added these 2 Florida statutes. From there, they added on contract not recordable, this again, title companies, official records. They just changed, and we're still using fax machines. Collection from uppercase to lowercase. Somebody's coming in at this time. And then even though this is all scratched off, it does not mean that they got rid of the addendas and the additional terms on here. They have added them here. They did take off the K and L, which were reserved. They took out the these pre-closing occupancy and so forth, because I believe they were added in, somewhere. Here we are. They were added in either different letters or, they did change those 7 riders. So that might be part of those changes. Make sure you do check them out. And from there on, everything else stays the same. The additional terms got added in an additional 3 lines. Counter offer, pretty much all you got in major change here was just seller counters buyer's offer. The other 2 lines were taken off. And that is it. These are your changes on the contract. Any questions? All right, then this concludes our class, guys. I wish you guys an amazing Monday.
Thank you very much.
You're super welcome. On the chat, I did put a link to the Florida Realtor site where you guys can get this contract. You guys can also check out the summary of the changes in a lot simpler wording and form. Check them out. If I were you guys, I know that we are only doing the HACCP's contract. And I know that if you go to the board classes, they're only showing you that HACCP's contract. Please do go ahead and take the time and check out the 3 new writers, as well as writers that they have created changes on, okay? All of them do go on effect on November 1st. So make sure that you guys are up to date with all this stuff, okay? That is next Monday.
Andreina,
Yes, sir.
hopefully the form simplicity will be changed too, right?
Form simplicity should be changed because that is part of the Florida Realtors. Dot loop will change automatically. Again, guys, try to get to know dot loop. That is what we use. We pay you a lot quicker when you guys use it. 24-hour turnaround instead of up to 3 days. So try to go ahead and use our dot loop in our accounts, but they should all change automatically on November 1st. Okay.
Thank you.
If they do not
Thank you.
change, please know that this is out of the office's control. Okay. Get on top of the boards. If you don't see the changes in your contract, I beg you, because even though I call them 20 times, you guys know that if one major changes, it comes from the masses. If you guys do not see these changes in our systems where you guys gather your forms instead of calling me, because there's nothing I can do to add them on, okay? Call the board and say, hey, I do not see the new contract in. We will get a lot more done and quicker if you guys bother the board as much as I will be bothering them if I don't see the contract, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're
Thank
super
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day, guys.